And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and other co-host, Joe DeLeone. What a week 7 of college football we had yesterday, my friend.
It was so amazing how much the games lived up to the hype. Blake, I have to bring up, we might have a little bit of a kiss of death going on in this situation here where consistently, I think we're 3 weeks or 3 out of the last 4 weeks, the team that you and I have ranked number 1 on our power rankings has lost.
False. So, not this past week, but the week before we had Texas.
Okay, so we're the 3 of the last 4 then. So we had Georgia, they lost to Alabama. We had Alabama, they lost to Vandy. And then we had Ohio State this past week, and they lost to Oregon. So whoever's number 1 this week on our power rankings better be awfully careful.
Well, you know who's number 1 on my power rankings this weekend as a fan?
It's Texas.
It's Arkansas. So I mean, listen. That's
not reasonable.
Speaking of things that continue to hurt us, or if we put you at 1, things going bad. The LSU Tigers are 3-0 when I put them in my top 10 power rankings.
I have so many things I have to say about that game. I'm going to save it, but I texted you this. You're going to be upset because I'm not going to really give a lot of love to LSU, and it's going to be mostly Ole Miss directed. But congrats on the win, though. It was a great win. You fought hard. You took advantage of the opportunities multiple times. Big dub. You won at home. It helps.
Here's what everybody's doing. Speaking of that game, really quickly.
Yes,
they're saying that LSU took care of took over in opportunities. No. You had 125th total ranked defense last year that now is in the top 40s. Here's what the actual truth of the matter is. Blake Baker. That's the actual matter of the truth. Joe, they've only given up 200 yards rushing in the last 4 games total. If I would have told you coming into the season that would have happened, you would have said Blake Baker is a GOAT. So the God's honest truth is when you only give up 14 rushing yards on UCLA, you only give up 100 and some odd yards, I think, last night. That is a big deal. By the way,
they gave up 180 last night.
Yeah, and they only gave up 14 the week before. So 200 in the last 3 games, excuse me. And then they gave up 7 the week before that.
Okay, we're gonna move past. Look, Blake Baker has been an improvement for this defense.
So they're a top 40 defense.
The defensive, yes, it has been a significant improvement. Their defense was a big reason why they won, but I think you and I can both agree that Ole Miss did shoot themselves in the foot a lot and hand LSU opportunities to hang around and stay in that game. Overtime is the perfect description of that.
No, I think that's where they're playing. I told you on Friday that I was out and about and that this place was going to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
There are just some places that you cannot go and win at night. That is as our good buddies over at SEC Unfiltered said today, that is Vatican City. I tried to warn you about it. By the way, your boys got a 2-game lead now in our pick'ems. I told you.
Plenty of time for me to – I'm not worried about that. Plenty of time for it. Well, I'll save our thoughts on that game, though. Okay, I still think that it's more telling.
Not the only great game that happened yesterday. Down goes Ohio State. Dan Lanning gets that big win he had been criticized about. Oregon pulls it off.
Yeah, and that's going to be my big talking point when we jump into that segment is that Dan Lanning proves to us that he's taking that next step this season. That was the biggest question mark we spent endless amounts of time discussing. Can he get the big win over Ohio State? Can he win the Big Ten championship this year? He had faltered and not succeeded last season, especially when they couldn't get past Washington. And here we are. This Oregon team feels great. I am very juiced up for the race that's happening in the Big Ten right now because it's the most competitive that we have out of any of the conferences. Because think about that. The ACC has 2 teams, and that's about it. The Big 12, it is competitive.
Outside of Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, those are the only 3 teams that realistically have a shot of winning it.
when I say competitive, I'm talking about like 3 top 10 teams that are all in striking distance. No other conference can say that. The SEC can't say that at the current moment outside of Texas and Georgia. Maybe LSU is in that convo, but
you're 1,000% giving up on Bama?
I'm not 100% all the way there yet, but I don't know if they don't look SEC championship worthy. I've got a couple of things
Joe,
I'm going to bring up later.
Did they look SEC championship worthy last year?
Well, that was one of the things that I was going to bring up later.
So, again, I get what you're saying. In reference to the game of Oregon and Ohio State, which we're going to get to, listen, man, bottom line, it comes down to this for me. Dillon Gabriel. We talked about it last week about him showing up in big games, and you had pointed out, well, there have been some games that he didn't. And I said, yeah. But a week ago, or this week, a year ago in the Red River Shootout, he was the reason that they beat a playoff team in Texas. And, Joe, to be honest with you, the 27-yard run I felt like was a backbreaker. And here's another thing. Everybody keeps telling me that he's not the most electric passer. Okay, I'm with you. He carved up Ohio State. He carved them up like a Thanksgiving turkey on a Thursday of Thanksgiving. That man got carved up like John Madden live on Fox when he's doing a football game. I mean, Jude, that man absolutely abused that secondary.
Well, also, Will Stein did a fantastic job of scheming against that secondary.
No
one
doubt.
That was supposed to be one that we said was one of the best in the country. And not only did they give up big plays,
to really interrupt you, okay? To very rudely interrupt you, somebody that's been taking a lot of heat the last 3 weeks. So you can expound on that. Will Stein has been taking heat more than anybody from an OC standpoint.
Yeah. No, and I think that he and Dan Lanning have really built the case for why they deserve more respect. And I think that their criticism was fair, though. Like, for a lot of the Oregon fans that are probably hopping in here to say that they feel that, we didn't give them a fair shot, they didn't look like they were prepared to win against Ohio State in the previous weeks leading up to the season. If you thought they looked like they were firing on all cylinders, stepping into this matchup, you're crazy. There were a ton of issues and a ton of misfires on offense especially. But what was most important, and why I'm going to give a lot of praise to Dan Lanning when we jump into that segment, is that he got his guys locked in. They were prepared. They pushed past the adversity and they got ready to go.
Got a question for you that you don't have to answer right now. Okay. You may be right. They may have been locked in, but my God's honest question is that, like we asked all week, who is Ohio State? Because this is the first time that they were really tested. And again, we don't have to answer right now. It's what we'll get to in the segment. But Ohio State, were they actually tested? No, they had not been. And Oregon was able to be the team that could do it. Joe had two other overtime games, Tennessee and Florida, that happened along with Penn State and USC, 2 thrillers that we're going to discuss here too.
Yeah, especially that USC game. And, oh, man, I am excited to talk about our good friend Lincoln Riley. Oh, I am so excited to talk about him. But the praise certainly belongs going to Penn State for a situation. I've got something I need to bring up that everybody is completely moving past that everybody was talking about. I'm going to save it till we get to that segment. But there's always some BS that people like to bring up going into a game like that. And the minute that a team wins, they're really quiet about a certain difficult situation that Penn State had to endure. You could probably guess where I'm going with that.
Look, man, here's the truth. Teams going out west now, Game Day put this statistic out. Teams going out west they're in the Midwest that go out west for a football game, they're now 2-15. The only teams that have gone out west and won has been Indiana over UCLA and has been Penn State over USC. I don't know if that's the stat that you're going to talk about, but I think it's very well notable to bring up. Also, another game that we're going to discuss here that probably should have gone into overtime, but Shane Beamer wasn't an idiot. Lenore Sellers, on the last play of the game, gets a pick, and Joe, what could have been a safety on Alabama if they don't run it out. The Alabama-South Carolina game was the appetizer of how crazy and chaotic the day was going to be in college football.
Yeah, if South Carolina fans had any desire to have a winning football team, I'd wonder if Shane Beamer would still have his job at the current moment. But he's strung together multiple weeks now where they have just made bad decision after bad decision, bad play after bad play, undisciplined football week in and week out. South Carolina, and nobody's talking about this. Everybody's focused on Bama because South Carolina is irrelevant for just any large national picture. They mean nothing for anything that we're ever going to talk about on this show, as it should be. But if that was a slightly more competent team, Alabama lost yesterday. Alabama would have lost at home to a team that if they had like a little bit, maybe if that was Arkansas that has their ducks in a row a little bit more and was able to finish a game a little bit better, they would have won that football game. Similar structure too, with the way that their quarterback plays and they run the football.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe had a bad day. Again, had another bad day. Here's what I think is happening when we'll talk about when we get in there. Okay. I think that I think ever since the second half when Kirby Smart showed and gave the blueprint on how to stop them, they have had massive issues. Vandy, they've had massive issues now against South Carolina. And listen, I'm not going to be like you. I know you don't want to talk about South Carolina, and that's fine.
No, I don't mind talking about them. I just think that they're a joke.
Well, you got to be careful with that because here's the truth. Here's the reason why. Because, yeah, they've lost 2 bad ones the last 2 weeks. Probably shouldn't have happened in one of them, that being Bama. Joe, I can make the case and come out here right now that they have the best D-line in the country. I can make that case.
Well, okay, but how many times do we see coaches that recruit really well and then certain position groups show up in games, but when it comes down to actual execution in key moments in those football games, that they falter? It's the head coach's fault. It's a theme that I love to bring up, and then I think it's something that's not covered.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that. But here's the thing: when you talked about the conferences, South Carolina has the potential. I don't think that they will, but they have the potential to upset somebody that they have no business beating down the stretch.
Sure.
So there comes a part where, look, I don't have their schedule. I'm just throwing out a random team. Hypothetically, if they play Georgia, I think you could, especially with Mississippi State keeping that game close. Joe, that game was a 7-point game going in.
I know.
So again, you get to a place where you're just like, could it happen? 2 other games that another game that we're going to talk about here and wrap it up. That being Texas and Oklahoma. Joe, I have no idea where to go with here. This is what I'm going to say. Okay, Oklahoma fans, you were warned. You were warned on this show what it was going to be like. And I'm going to continue to come out here every single week and talk about it until you admit that maybe you were wrong.
I'm when we get to that segment, I'm probably not going to spend any time on Oklahoma because to be not to sound too harsh, but similar to what I just said with South Carolina, they're not in the national picture. They shouldn't be ranked for the remainder of the season. But you're 100% right. Everything that we said in the offseason was completely, and we said it 2 years ago. There's one of our most watched videos is from 2 years ago in the inception of this channel. When we talked about when their first SEC schedule was released, we said that this is the hardest schedule and that it's going to be an uphill battle and that they're going to struggle in year one. And it's not an indictment on the success of the future of the program. But Oklahoma fans didn't want to listen to that because we were being too realistic.
Oh, I want to throw this out there too. There's 2 key notes that we need to talk about before we get rolling here. Did Iowa State win this weekend?
They did win this weekend.
Huh.
West Virginia looked like crap.
Oh, well, just hold on
to anything.
Okay. What was Garrett Green passing?
Was he 53% again?
No, he was 56, but I mean, he's still right there. Okay. So I'm just going to throw that out there. All the West Virginia fans that continue to give me hate, go find Jesus. And one other note before we get rolling here. Congratulations is in order to you, good sir. We have eclipsed the 10,000 subscriber mark. We appreciate everybody that is in here and that gives us all the love. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Like, look, we got Douglas Witt right here, Joe, with a $10 super chat and says, give me a quadruple quackery.
I don't know exactly what that means, but sure.
It's like this. Quack, 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 go Ducks. But see, you never watched Mighty Ducks, so you don't know what a quadruple quackery is.
No, I don't know what that is. Got to be completely honest. We had another super chat, by the way.
Soul in your life, brother. You need to go watch Gordon Bombay lead the USA team in D2.
I got too much football to watch, man. I got too much ball to watch.
Well, thank you, Douglas, for the super chat.
Thank you, Douglas.
Yes, but you need to culture yourself in the offseason. But thank you all, or thank to all of you who continue to make this channel fantastic. We could not do this without you. Absolutely. Elks with a $5 super chat, our regional Ohio State fan, says, if I see any more off coverage, I'm going to punch my TV. Wide receivers were pressed. They didn't get much, was all over coverage from what I could see. Prayers for Simmons.
Is Elks? I'm confused. Is Elks referencing just the general DB coverage, or was he talking about the OPI? That's what I'm a little confused.
I'm not sure. We're going to talk about both of them, so we'll get into that with the segment. And I'm sure Elks will be here and listening, so we'll get into it. Here's what I'll say: you did if it's the opposite, not the OPI. You play bump and run, man-to-man coverage on Evan Stewart, and he beat you.
And there was no counter.
No,
there was no
counter. Was play off coverage and hope you don't get beat deep. And it started helping, but they started attacking the middle of the field when you went too high. And that I mean, it's not complicated. Will Stein pieced you apart. Yeah. And so, look, big game for Evan Stewart. We're going to talk about in just a second. All right, Let's get rolling. Excuse me. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. If you're on Facebook, share to all those groups and to all the social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts. Do us a favor by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. We come back and break down Week 7, Oregon, Ohio State next. Stay with us.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag.
We're back! And apparently, so is Quinn Ewers, but people continue to call me a crazy person when I talk about Quinn Ewers. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Texas does get a win in the Red River Shootout. Joe, Oregon and Ohio State faced off yesterday in what was an outright thriller. Oregon finally, after last year playing Washington twice and losing, Dan Lanning under fire if he can win the big game at Oregon. Beats Ohio State, the number one team in the country, 32-31 in Eugene. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, my biggest thing, and I don't want to spend too much time. I think we're going to certainly debate what happened and went through this game, but I have to jump in first by giving Dan Lanning the credit where it is 1,000% deserved. There was a ton of doubt coming into this game by a lot of people. A lot of people, including us on this show, that believed that they did not show us signs that they were going to show up and beat Ohio State. And there were even questions on, is this team ready to take that next step? Can Dan Lanning win the big game when he struggled to do so last year against Washington? Couldn't get over the hump. I argue now that I think that Dan Lanning, by winning this football game, shows us and proves to us he is entering that upper echelon in the premier tier of coaches in the country. He did exactly what other teams need to do as the blueprint for winning a national championship and winning your conference, which is dominating high school recruiting by going after athletic defensive linemen and stout offensive linemen, and then using the transfer portal to supplement in individual positions, but not leaning on it too much. In an era where we have seen Mike Norvell and Lane Kiffin falter because they have relied too much on the transfer portal, Dan Lanning is the man who's doing it right. So Lanning deserves a ton of credit. The way that he got his team up, despite being rusty in the previous weeks in various areas, they played a near perfect football game. It's hard to do that. The whole stadium was rocking. Everything was going in the direction, and I have to give all that credit to Dan Lanning.
You can't give up 31 points and play a damn near perfect game. I get what you're
Hold
trying.
on. Wait. Come on, man. That's one of the best offenses in the country.
But you said a damn near perfect game. A perfect game is a shutout. I mean, like, let's just be honest. I mean, come on.
I think you're taking me a little too literal.
Oh, I am taking you a little too literal. But listen, when I look at this game, went back and watched it, the whole thing again today, you talk about Dan Lanning, and I'm not going to take that shine. I do want to get to Ryan Day in a moment, but I want to start with the winner. I want to start with Oregon. Joe, it's Dillon Gabriel, man. And I think that there comes a place in time. I don't want to get in the debate with you here because we got a lot to talk about, of really good college quarterbacks that make big-time plays and big-time moments in big-time games. What do you want me to talk about? The 27-yard run for a touchdown when he's running away from people, or the ball placement that he has to Evan Stewart that is absolutely elite? Like, this guy made all the big plays. He took some hits, got right back up. Joe, the God's honest truth is that they played their best game in the biggest moment, but their quarterback played the best game that he had in the biggest moment. Look, I did not know if Oregon would be able to line up with the offensive line that had been struggling, that would be able to run the football. Because, Joe, let's call it what it is, man. They had been struggling running the football. I know the week before, James and company got things going, but before that, they had really had moments where they had struggled in the run game. Joe, they attacked one of the best secondaries and made them look I don't know.
Pedestrian. They made him look like a JV squad.
I don't want to say pedestrian, because I do think that they got out schemed and were in bad positions because of scheme. But they have everything that you need. The O-line played good. They ran the ball. And here's the thing, man. I felt like going and rewatching the game in crucial moments, when James is carrying the football, when Dillon Gabriel pulls it and runs it for a touchdown, or throws it over the middle on a crucial third down, I felt like the hunger was there for one team more than the other. Now, I get it. You know, the game's away. Ohio State's got to go across the country. It's a tough environment to be in, and they lost by a point. I don't want to take anything away from Ohio State. I still think they're a really good football team. But I think the difference in this game, whether you want to however you want to slice it or dice it, comes down to how Dillon Gabriel played. I mean, look, man. Joe, going into the fourth quarter, he was completing 85% of his passes on third downs. I mean, like, there comes a part where I think he's getting better in the system, and him being who he is with the playmakers that he had outside. Joe, let's call it what it is. At Oklahoma last year, this kid did not have the playmakers on the outside than what he does right now. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that's one point that we actually, or at least I remember I brought up one of the weeks, and actually maybe it was when we were arguing and you were disagreeing with me. But the point that I had made is that the offense is going to not look great immediately because you have a new quarterback coming in and trying to learn that system and get to know his guys. It was perfect timing that this was the week that they finally felt like they were playing together as a team, and instead of all the miscues and the misfires. So it's part of the process. You were less doom and gloom than some other people. There were plenty of other people in the national landscape that were really starting to doubt Oregon's capabilities.
You couldn't ignore. Let's call it what the truth is. It's a reason why you picked Ohio State to win this one too. You couldn't ignore the lack of running game. You couldn't ignore the lack of miscues and mistakes. And look, Dillon Gabriel threw 2 picks last week. I mean, like, as much as I'm praising him, okay, they were a little erratic the week before. But Joe, them being able to run the football on that defensive line is insane. I mean, look, they pushed them around. They were faster to the edge. They got the crucial yards up the middle. And Joe, we'll talk about this with Ohio State, because I said that they had a guard problem. I think Lanning outcoached them, moving in some smaller guys into the interior on guards. Like Trayvon Henderson had the fumble where it got stripped from him. Like, dude, I had been preaching. Joe, how many times did I said Ohio State has a guard problem?
Well, we were specific that the issues at right guard, I believe.
But I said both, and I got yelled at. But the bottom line is that they schemed up so many different things on Ohio State that, to your point about Dan Lanning, I talked about Dillon Gabriel. Dan called a fantastic game. Look, let's call it what it is. He's going to have his hands on the defensive side of things. But even things that they were doing defensively, I thought were crucial in where they stood. They did a very great job in how they schemed things up. And here's another thing. They had a big key player out defensively. So, I mean, look, man, they were beat up, Birch out. They have guys that need to come in. They scheme things up, and they were able to take advantage. I want to throw this out there too. Joe, I'd been wondering when Evan Stewart was going to make an appearance.
Yeah.
Okay. He had kind of been all over the place. He hadn't been getting his touches. Joe, the dude went off. I mean, 7 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. The touchdown he had was purely insane. I just think that they have so many weapons, the way that they can attack you. They're very tough to scheme at the current moment offensively if that's how they're going to look.
I don't know how to make sense of this, but one of the craziest stats that comes out of this game is that Denzel Burke on 8 targets allowed 8 receptions for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. They kept going after him because they realized he couldn't keep up with him. And look, a lot of people are saying that like, oh, Denzel Burke sucks. He's cooked. He's still a very athletic football player, but I wonder, does he bounce back from this? Like, what does this mean for Ohio State down the line? Because our team's going to try to recreate this. I think it's the inverse. I just think that Evan Stewart, who had this 5-star caliber talent that never had really come to full fruition, finally came to its full moment where we saw it show up on the field. We saw him make the plays that we knew that he can make, which is making these tight catches and creating separation in short areas because he's quick. He's got great long speed. I was impressed, which is something that I didn't know he was even capable of. He's a lighter guy. I think he's like 180 something, and he was still able to win in those tight spots over Burke. I'm not saying this to take anything away from Dillon Gabriel. I agree that he had a fantastic game, but I would argue it's not just Dillon Gabriel who won this football game. I think that the whole team played so well together. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying that. Like, I didn't think that's what you were implying. It's just that I think that the whole team worked together so effectively is why they were able to beat Ohio State. And it comes down to Josh Simmons goes down with the injury, who is this budding star at left tackle for Ohio State. And Mateo Uyunglele starts cooking. And he had a huge game, the young guy on that defensive line filling in for
critical third down stop. TFL, I thought was very critical. Look, man, they were, like you said, they were beat up. They had some issues, but they overcame them. Look, I'll say this for Dan, okay? You asked me in the offseason a very specific question about if I had to start a program, what coach would I take? And I said Dan Lanning. This is why. I think that he's molded different. The way you talked about how he built the program is 100% correct. But, man, I got to flip it on the inverse for just a quick second, Joe. Got to read this off to you. Ryan Day is 2-4 in bowl games. He's 1-3 against Michigan. He's 1-7 against top 5 opponents. And he's 0-3 against the SEC. I mean, like, if Dan Lanning would have lost this football game, I mean, early in the career of his tenure, I think people would have been like, yeah, okay. I mean, like, they were supposed to lose. Dan, they're still coming on. I got to be real with you, man. I'm starting to question, like, hey, everybody pointed to big game Dan Lanning not winning any. But then I look at Ryan Day saying he's 1-7 against top 5 opponents. That's not good.
Well, and you also look, too, at, like, the misfirings in the final 5 minutes of this game where they should have won it and they should have been able to finish the game out with how good their roster was. And they completely let the game slip away from them. That 1,000% falls on Ryan Day's head. I'm not going to sit here and say that Ryan Day's cooked, he's done. Like, I'm not going to say that.
No,
but
because they're going to get in the playoffs and they're going to make a run. And I mean, come on.
This does start a conversation, though, that we can't ignore. If they don't win the Big Ten championship game, and if they don't go on to, if they don't win the Big Ten championship game, there's a chance that they might miss out on the playoffs, but I don't think that that's likely.
10-2 Ohio State team's not missing the playoff.
If they get bounced, no, they'd be 10-2. If they get bounced,
no, they'd be 11-2 because if they don't lose,
you're right. If they get bounced in the first or second round of the playoff, I would argue that there's going to be serious frustration from Ohio State fans. And I don't know what that result is. Like, I don't know. I know that certain fan bases are far more impatient than others. I know Ohio State fans have this national championship expectation. And it might not come to fruition this year. But one thing is worth bringing up. One thing that we say a ton on the show. Oregon fans aren't going to love this. It's hard to beat a good team twice.
Yeah, very much so.
To Ohio State's benefit to lose to Oregon the first time and then to win the Big Ten championship game and to then get the bye in the playoff.
Well, the question would be, Joe, if they played tomorrow in a neutral field, who would you take them? I think that's the argument a lot of people, come up with. I think it's hard to say that you wouldn't take Oregon. And look, on field on-field stuff has to matter. If we're going to go to Ohio State here, this is what I'd say. Number one, I thought you got away from the running game a little too quickly. Look, to be honest with you, I think Will Howard is a very serviceable quarterback. And look, I'm not going to get in this debate with you. I thought he did enough for you to win the football game.
Yeah, I didn't agree with that when we were texting. Yeah. That was my whole statement, is I think he did enough. But again,
here's where I'll go. I think he did more than enough to win you the football game. And let me tell you why. Because, Joe, there were moments and times in that game in the second half, Oregon was putting 5 guys in the box and they didn't adjust. TreVeyon Henderson literally had 8.7 yards per carry. Joe, outside the long run that he had in the first half, they should have continued on some of these drives. I get that they were going off in the passing game in moments, but you're literally running the football for 7 yards a carry in the last 20 plays, Joe. They threw the ball 18 times.
I know that I understand that you're saying that, yes, some of the play calling does come down on Chip Kelly, and some of the decisions that he made in the end of this game were not good. They were not setting them up to win. But my whole take is still not wrong, that I had the whole offseason that I had in this week coming into the game that Ohio State fans got so upset over, which is that Will Howard is a good enough of a player to connect with his very gifted elite skill players to deliver them the football. But when I got a call on him with the game on the line, or needing to climb back into a football game, he's just not that guy. And I'm not that's not me trying to be negative. That's not me trying to say this guy sucks. That's not what I'm saying.
To rudely interrupt you, okay? If I would have came into this game and said, listen, if I would have told you on Thursday that Will Howard would have 330 passing yards and 3 total touchdowns, what would you have said? Be honest with me now.
I texted you this. He is somebody who is a stat sheet champion. He's a guy that his numbers will always look freaking good, but then when we actually watch the games and evaluate it, it's not as impressive as it sounds.
Joe, I mean, he continued to go back to his playmakers. I mean, the God's honest truth is they got to make crucial stops. Hold on. This is what, if any Ohio State fan disagrees with this, then I'm sorry. Here's the truth. You can't let guys like Dylan Gabriel, who's not the fleetest of foot, get out in the open space and run the football.
Stop doing this. Stop doing this. We're not talking about Dylan Gabriel. We're not talking about the run defense.
Page. If you'll let me turn the page, I'm trying to turn the page. Okay. The truth is about Ohio State, you bragged about your front 7 all year. You bragged about your secondary play. You bragged about your safety play. The God's honest truth was you got run all over. And, Joe, the game plan, Oregon never got away with it from the running game, ever. They continue to pound you in crucial situations to continue to maintain drives. Ohio State massively got away from that. Again, you can blame Will Howard or whatever we want to do, but the God's honest truth is
I'm not blaming Will Howard.
That front 7 in the second half got pushed around. Now, you can blame whatever you want, but when I look at the second half and you have 85 yards rushing put on your head, that's a problem.
It certainly is, and that was one of the complete polar opposites of what we talked about in the preview the entire week, which is that Ohio State's front 7 was supposed to be so talented that it was supposed to effectively remove Oregon's rushing attack and that they'd have to throw the ball too much. Yeah, I think that the biggest issue to take away from this game for Ohio State for the rest of this year is that your defense did not step up to the plate when they're supposed to be the backbone of your roster.
No doubt.
Your run defense, you're supposed to have Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimola are supposed to be 2 of the best run defending edge rushers in all of college football. Tyleik Williams is supposed to be this monster in the inside. And that was what I said all week on every radio spot that I did. But none of that showed up. And maybe some of that goes on Knowles. Like, I don't know. I think a good bit of it does have to go on Jim Knowles because they didn't look ready. They looked out-coached, out-efforted, out-schemed, out-prepared.
No doubt. And that's what ultimately lost them the football game. And look, Joe, even in the critical moments, so Oregon kicks a field goal at the end of the game to go up by 1, right? If you go back and watch it, they ran 3 minutes off the clock when they got inside their own 20. 3 minutes. So again, Dan Lanning said, look, I have enough faith in what I do and my team to make the stop. And ultimately they did. One team made the stop, the other didn't. And look, I'm not going to put that on Will Howard. We can talk about the PI call. It is what it is. But the God's honest truth is one made the stop and the other didn't. And that's what, like, it comes down to those crucial moments, those crucial situations. And I got to say this too. You got run all over, but here's the truth. They went in on Quinshon Judkins. Judkins had 11 carries of 26 yards. They bottlenecked him. They put multiple guys extra guys in the box to stop him from running the football. And Joe, I think Chip Kelly, for what it's worth, got scared to go back to it. Joe, if you can't line up in 3rd and 2 and run the football, if you're too scared to do that, then I don't know what to tell you. I thought that this would be a different Ohio State team than what it is. And here's the truth. You had not been tested before you faced this football team. Even though Oregon had not necessarily been tested, the truth was they had their backs up against the wall against a Boise State team that they had to kick a field goal. Adversity had struck their program already. You have a quarterback that's been in these type of situations before that overcame them. Now, Joe, I don't know what you make of this team. I still think that they're a really good football team. I'm not writing them off in a 1-point loss on the road. Just not going to happen. But what I will say is, if you don't clean up that front seven, and especially in some of the run deficiencies, you're going to get beat.
Yeah, they have to play better football. And to their advantage, there's a long stretch of their schedule that's pretty weak. I still think Ohio State
go to Happy Valley in 4 weeks. I mean, Joe, that's the only time that they'll get tested.
Yeah, I think that they still beat Penn State with that next matchup that they have, the next tough matchup for a while. But they got to get right before they play Oregon again, assuming that they can finish this year out strong and be in the Big Ten championship game. Their season's not over. It's 1,000% nowhere near over. And I don't think anyone should paint it as such. Those are 2 of the best teams in the country, 2 top 3 teams. I might not even move Ohio State that far back. Like, might move them to 2 and move Oregon up to 1. Like, that's probably how my power rankings are going to end up looking.
I can't do that because, Joe, here's the truth. There are going to be teams, and there are teams that can run the ball more effectively than Oregon and have better offensive lines. I don't know if I can do that right now. But look, like you said, it's a long season. Let me ask you this before we turn the page here. Was that pass interference on Jeremiah Smith?
You can't extend and shove a defensive back. It's not like he ran into him and then came back to the football. You can't shove and then come back to the football. It's OPI.
I saw Ohio State fans blaming Will Howard for sliding. I get it's a dumb Dak Prescott type of move here. Brother, you're in 3rd and 25. I mean, like, once you're in that situation.
He's got to have better awareness than that, man.
Okay, like, fair. But you know what? I'm going to say
this.
Throwing
the ball away is better than him running.
But I'm going to say this and move on, okay? James had 115 yards on them. That's not on Will. And like you said, everything that Ohio State had coming into the season, you told me that you had one of the best front sevens in the country, and you got run all over. That's God's honest truth.
Okay, but that's deflecting from the conversation of, did Will Howard fail to succeed in the situation where he needed him to? Did he make a wrong decision? Yes, he did. That is his fault. I know we're not going to agree. We're not.
Yeah, but I just vastly disagree with you. All right, want to go down to Baton Rouge?
Yeah, let's do it.
Joy, thriller last night in Death Valley. LSU in overtime, never leads in the game, shocks the world, as some people had told me today. Even though your boy picked them to win, of course I did. But LSU beats Ole Miss in overtime. Your thoughts on the game?
Absolutely, got to give LSU credit for the way that they finished. They had. In all seriousness, like, they had no reason to win that football game. Like, they did not play clean. They had a number of bad turnovers, gave up a couple of big plays to Ole Miss that any outside onlooker, if you didn't tell them what the final score was and they stopped watching with, like at the end of the 3rd quarter, they would have all said that Ole Miss won the football game. But LSU took advantage of every opportunity that they had. Look, my biggest takeaway here, though, I can't not focus on Ole Miss. I can't not focus on Lane Kiffin. What we spoke about the other day when they lost to Kentucky, it is extremely problematic that there was this high expectation with everything that they did this offseason, with how much better they were supposed to get from last year and the way that they finished last year, that they were supposed to be a legit SEC contender and a playoff contender. They're out of the playoff mix. Like, I don't think that they have enough on their resume on the bone to go 9-3 and to finish this year strong enough unless they beat Georgia to get into the playoff convo. I think, and this will probably piss some folks off, he's going to Florida. Like there's no way.
You pushed
I
back
know
on me so much during the offseason when I said that you can't come in here and I was been saying this all offseason. Hold on, you can't do that to me. You cannot do that to me.
Yes, I can.
You got to come in here and say, Blake, you might have been right. He might be going to Florida.
Okay, you might have been right, but things have changed. You said that in the offseason, and there wasn't not enough had happened. Hold on. If Ole Miss had gone to the SEC championship game, which was my argument, is that if Ole Miss had done well, he might not leave.
And if my aunt had a penis, she would be my uncle. But reality is not that way.
It has come to the point, though, where I'm all in on that being the future because he couldn't get it done at Ole Miss. It's got to be going through his head now that the minute they pick up the phone and call him, and if Florida's going to be interested, that's the best available option on the market that's going to be willing to leave their current school. They're going to say, well, you couldn't get it done at Ole Miss because they had enough resources, but not enough for you to win a national championship. Come not really come home, but come to Florida and you can win one. But yeah, I mean, we have to admonish Lane Kiffin for not finishing that football game.
Well, Joe, I think that there's something in play here that I want to bring up. LSU allowed 6 points in the second half. 6. I think it's very disingenuous, not for you, but I've seen some, to constantly blame Lane when that defense stepped up for LSU. Look, you had Harold Perkins out. You're coming off a bye. Whit Weeks has 18 tackles. He has a sack. Joe, by the way, just throwing this out there, never in the history of a Lane Kiffin offense in the SEC has a team had more sacks than 5. Alabama did it last year at 5. LSU had 6. Braden Swinson, 2 sacks. You had a safety in Major Burns who had a sack and a half. The God's honest truth is after that second quarter, LSU stood up and they literally stopped them on everything that they did. Now, do I think Lane had some bad play calls in there? Yes. But I think the storyline of this game, okay, is that LSU's started figuring things out on defense. I don't know how that you can walk away from that game with the amount of tackles for loss that they had, with all the sacks that they had. Look, do they have some leaky stuff in the secondary? Yeah, I will continue to admit that all the live long day. But the God's honest truth is that front seven under Blake Baker and Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples stepped up, and they made this game what it was. Joe, here's the truth. LSU has 9 points this year off of 9 turnovers. Now, they had 3 turnovers yesterday. You'll go in the box score and say, well, they only had 2. No, LSU forced a turnover on downs. The reason they call it a turnover on downs is it's technically a turnover. Why they don't list that as a turnover, I have no idea. They made a crucial stop in the red zone. But every time that LSU made a boneheaded decision on offense, it was Blake Baker on that defense that stepped up. It's not like Trey Harris wasn't getting the football. It's not like they didn't try to go to Juice Wells. The truth is one team made the plays and the others didn't. And we went into this season saying that, look, oh, man, they got Princely Human Yellen. They got Walter Nolan. They got all these guys. Joe, they didn't give up a sack. So the God's honest truth was I know what they did in the portal. I still think that they have a lot of talent. But offensively, the last 3 weeks in the SEC, Ole Miss has been not good. Now, they also, you can make the argument that they face 3 elite pass rushes in the SEC. LSU now, hold on. LSU is now in the top 8 in sacks in the season. Joe, they have more sacks now. They're going to be tripled than what they had a year before. So, again, I look at that offensive line for Ole Miss, and I look at the pass rush for LSU, that being the game. Their O-line is really bad, meaning Ole Miss's is.
I'm 1,000% willing to give credit to LSU and their defense getting better and them playing as good as they did, bending but not breaking in situations where they were in scoring spots. But I'm sorry that I can't help but be super hyper focused on because here's one thing that's very true. It's LSU. It's Brian Kelly. The expectation is supposed to be coming into the season, and one of the conversations we had this offseason was that LSU should be a top 10 team. I thought that they were going to beat USC, and I thought that they were going to go on a tremendous run before they showed up to play against Ole Miss. And then if they beat Ole Miss, their next big challenge ending up being against Alabama. And that would kind of be the real indicator of how good they were. We expected that from them. Ole Miss is never consistently good. And Lane Kiffin does all this.
They're third in the SEC in wins in the last 4 years. You can't say that they're not good.
Okay, before that, they've never won it.
But you can't.
The history of them as a program is
okay. You can't say over the last 100 years they've been shitty.
You're hanging on to the wrong thing that I'm trying to bring up here. All I'm just trying to say here is that Lane has built this team up, and all the the shit that he talks, the trolling that he does in these press conferences, his personality. And the way that they were finally set up to have the expectation of being in the same conversation of an LSU, and they can't get the job done. They lose to Kentucky and they drop this game to LSU. And the biggest problem of all of this is what you just brought up a second ago. You're supposed to be an elite offense. You're supposed to be one of the best offensive minds in the country. It shouldn't matter if you're going up against good defenses. You should still find ways to finish and score, and you can't do it. That's the indictment on Lane Kiffin there.
I think it's too easy of an argument to come out here and say that they haven't faced 3 premier pass rushers. When you look at South Carolina and what they did to Bama and we'll talk about that in a moment. We know what Kentucky has on their defensive line, and LSU is top 8 in the country in sacks, Joe. I mean, like, you can't – I think it's very easy to come out here and say that. I understand what you're trying to say, but their O-line's bad, and they've been going up against – I don't want to say they're bad. I think they're average. And they've gone up against –
they're bad. They're getting their asses – they've gotten their ass kicked the last 3 weeks.
But I could make the argument, look at the D-lines and the front sevens that they've played. You can't – I get what you're trying to say. We as the media put expectations on teams. Look, Garrett Nussmeier was not good last night. Now, did he make crucial throws and crucial moments and crucial situations? Hell yes. Some of the windows that he was putting them in, you cannot take that away from him. Critical throws that he made. The one in overtime, absolutely amazing. But, Joe, every single time that they needed to stop, they got it. I mean, Joe, if I would have told you coming into this game that in one of the halves that Lane Kiffin would be held to 6 points, what would you have said? You would have said, what quarter did Jackson Dart get hurt in? Okay, let's not act.
I probably would have said, what dumb shit was Lane Kiffin doing?
Okay, well, fair. But there's a bigger issue in this. You have a total defense that was in the 110s last year. Now they're all the way up in the top 40s. There comes a part where we got to say LSU made adjustments coaching-wise, and it's paying off. Joe, they have the highest-paid defensive coordinator in the country. They have both of the highest-paid defensive line coaches in the country. Well, they're top 8 in sacks. That's why it's paying off. Now, I've said this on my other show in covering the team. I said it all week. Joe, this defense is better than anybody giving them credit for. I said on Thursday my keys to victory of why they would win. One, being at that place in Death Valley, which people continue to underestimate every single moment that they love to. You don't come in there and night win. But it was going to be the defense that propelled them to a win, and it did. Now, offensively, LSU has massive issues. They can't run the football. They are down a couple of receivers, and Nussmeier makes bad decisions, and there's bad play calling. But every single time the bell was being rung, LSU answered it. And I got to admit something, Joe. In primetime games at home, Brian Kelly is undefeated at LSU. He's 13-0. So everybody wants to come out here. We just had a segment about Dan Lanning and Ryan Day, right? Well, Brian Kelly's 13-0 in those situations at LSU. So everybody wants to paint Brian Kelly on one light, but not want to paint out Ryan Day in the other.
Wait, what was that stat for Brian Kelly?
He's 13-0 at night games at LSU. You can look it up.
LSU. At LSU. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, 13-0 at night at LSU. In prime, okay. Joe, you're talking about Alabama. You're talking about a top 10 Ole Miss. For a guy that can't win a big game, they continue to find ways to win them in primetime situations at home.
Well, the at-home part's the nice little added caveat because they still lost to USC. They still lost to USC, and USC stinks. They should have lost to USC. I mean, that has to get brought up.
Sure, but there also has to come a part where this dude is going on 8 years, about to be 9 of 10-win seasons plus.
But I didn't mean to make this about Brian Kelly, but that's Brian Kelly, man. Is that he does the things that he's supposed to, but
your inability to give LSU any credit because your expectation.
It's Brian Kelly. I will not give Brian Kelly. I gave him credit. Great win over Ole Miss. But again, losing to USC is a little bit of a scourge on the season, is it not?
You lost to NIU. Your favorite team lost to NIU.
We're not
What's the
talking
bigger
about
scourge?
Notre Dame. We're not talking about Notre Dame. We're talking
But
about Brian
that's where
Kelly.
your
We're
hatred
talking
from
about
Brian
LSU.
Kelly comes from.
It's not coming anywhere from there.
Okay, well then I want the same exact thing that you're doing to Ryan Day and Dan Lanning and all this. I want that same exact energy for Brian Kelly. It's not who was coaching; it's the place of where he's at. I said it.
He still has to win.
He just
playoff
did.
game, a playoff game. Look. I am not. Here's where I'm getting a little bothered by this. Great win. I said it was a great win. Great defensive performance. But it feels a little bit like you're crowning Brian Kelly for some weird consolation prize.
Joe, you literally came in here and most of the national media picked Ole Miss to win this football game.
Yeah.
Okay. The same thing happened with Oregon and Ohio State, did it not?
Yeah.
One guy gets crowned where the other doesn't.
Because one is in his third year ever as a head coach.
It doesn't matter when you look at it week to week, Joe.
We know, but this is why I came in opening and saying that my attention is on Lane Kiffin, because we know what Brian Kelly is. Like, we know that Brian Kelly can win these football games. Lane Kiffin can't. This was supposed to be a year that he could, and he still can't. That to me is a bigger story than Brian Kelly doing what we knew that he was supposed to do, which is win a football game at home in one of the hardest, or shall I say the hardest home environment in the country.
Where do you?
I'm giving LSU credit, though. I'm giving them credit.
You talked about Ole Miss. Where do you see LSU going from here?
I agree with what you said offensively. They have to be a lot cleaner. And as I mentioned earlier, their schedule is workable enough for them to play really consistently through the following weeks and to work through some of those issues. And I know they got Arkansas this week. They can't take them too lightly. They got to be ready against Texas A&M on the road, because we know that is a very difficult place to play, and getting Alabama at home is a huge advantage. But to your point, there can't be that many misfires against better football teams that know how to finish. You know, you can't be throwing those picks. You can't be going 22 of 51. That's a ton of passing attempts. You got to run the football better.
Well, they're getting away from it.
Right.
Okay. I mean,
right.
Again, the teams, like, you got to if you're getting 3 yards in a cloud of dust, get 3 yards in a cloud of dust. You can't just abandon it. Now, again, here's what I'm going to tell you. LSU's not winning out. Okay. They're not going to win out. They're going to lose another football game. To who, I don't know. But Garrett's inability to make crucial decisions at moments will come back to bite them in the ass. If they don't lose for whatever reason, it's going to be because that defense consistently gets better. Now, Joe, I'm going to throw this at you. Boy, they looked a little bit better without Perkins in this situation. And I think that comes to a part where Harold Perkins being out, they were able to play the defense that they needed to play, and they're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So, Look, here's what I think ultimately is going to happen. I think defensively, Joe, you're at the end of the season, we're going to look up here and be like, dude, they went from 115 to the top 40s and be like, what happened? They don't have the dudes that they need to have yet. Now, that's a whole couple recruiting classes away, but they got a tough stretch, so we'll see how they continue to perform here. All right, we got to get moving here. Which one you want to go? Let's go to Tennessee. Let's go to Texas and Oklahoma just very quickly to talk about this. Joe, the Red River blowout or shootout, however you want to call it, Texas takes care of business versus Oklahoma.
Yeah, to jump quickly past Oklahoma, we said this in the open. There shouldn't have been an expectation that Oklahoma was going to have some big year this year. What we thought about them coming into the season has become very true. Offensively, their offensive line's just not ready yet for them to compete in the SEC. But on the Texas side of things, I was really impressed by the way that their run game started to show up against what's a pretty strong front seven for Oklahoma. Trey Wisner stepped up. He had a big 36-yard run in the second quarter, 43-yard touchdown. Not long after that, they took advantage of all the turnovers that they were handed. They finished those drives out. I thought that this Texas team was continuing to stack and build opportunities to build confidence and to look competent. Where I am drawing pause, Quinn Ewers looked pretty rusty in the first half and longer, and they didn't really need to call on him to do anything in the third, fourth quarter because they were up by so many points. He can't be that rusty against Georgia. He can't. And I know that a lot of Texas fans are going to scream and yell, oh, they had Georgia gave up 31 points to Mississippi State. That's not relevant for what we're talking about at the current moment. They have the defensive backs that will take advantage of the mistakes that Quinn Ewers made in this football game when they face off with him. We'll save that for tomorrow. But he's got to be cleaner, man. And it does beg the question at a certain point. If he has another sloppy game like this and his team can't bail him out, and I'm not saying he played that poorly, does the Arch conversation start to heat up?
Well, no, because I don't think they're going to do that. I think what I've been saying from the very beginning about Ewers is he is who he is. Has he gotten better at some decision making and completion percentage? Yes. Knocking off some rust on that first interception, okay, that is fair. I understand that, but there were a lot of things that he did sloppy. But Joe, that was a really good defense he went up against, right? Like, I'm not going to take that away from him. I think for me, this is how I look about this outcome, or how I look at the outcome, and it's not fair to Texas. And I it is what it is, though. Joe, they have not been tested. Legitimately by an offense, they have not been tested. No. You have two quarterbacks in premier matchups, whether it be Michigan or Oklahoma, who cannot throw the football. Okay. And so when I look at Texas, now you're going to get tested this week versus Georgia, and I get that. Okay. And you're going to have a better team. But Joe, I look at them and just say the God obvious thing is I don't know what to make of the University of Texas. I have no clue. I don't know who they are. I don't know if they've been tested in any, like, I can see some of the good things that they've done, but against whomst? Like, against who? Joe, I'm looking at Oklahoma, okay? Their defense is supposed to be really good. Sounds good. They allowed 177 rushing yards against a team that doesn't have a premier back. And they don't. They don't have a premier back. I look at that secondary. In the third quarter, Quinn Ewers, 9 of 10. He was 4 for 4 on third down. I get that you don't have an offensive pulse and you start getting tired and you start getting stressed. I get all of that. I get that you have a lot of injuries. But for Texas, I have no idea what to make of them. We're halfway through the season plus. I don't know if they have deficiencies because there's been no offense that's been able to stress them enough to know. Like, Joe, we talk about their secondary. They're top 2 in the country in passing yards allowed, right? But have they played anybody that can stress them? No. So I don't know if that secondary, who was 113th in the country last year in passing yards allowed, are they that good? I'm going to throw this out there. What did we just find out about Ohio State? The worst thing of their defense a year ago was passing yards allowed. What is it now? What happened this past weekend? So for Texas, I don't know. Joe, I want to say this about Oklahoma. You're just going to have to wear this season. You're going to have to wear it.
And that's what we said at the beginning of the year. Like, stop being so impatient.
Look, their team. Look, here's the truth, man. If you're watching this show and me and Joe are agreeing, that's normally something that's very bad is going to happen for your football team. Because 10 times out of 10, it comes to fruition. Joe, their O-line stinks. They don't have a good enough. They're not good enough at quarterback play. They got injuries at premier positions. This season's going to get rough for them, man, and they got a lot more tested they got to overcome.
To elaborate on the Texas point that you made before we do jump to the next game, I completely agree with you. I think that anyone who says extremely confidently that Texas has proven that they're the best team in the country, I think it's extremely baseless. There's one great example that we just saw yesterday that has more of a stronger resume and a better performance on that resume. I get that the Michigan win was nice and it was a big momentum builder. And I also get that the Oklahoma win's great because it's over a rival. But what you just said is very true. These are paper tigers that you're beating up on. These are embodiments of
phrase than paper tigers, please.
It's a great phrase for the argument. You're using, it almost feels like you're banking off of this brand value of knocking around premier programs that are half of the teams that they usually are to build up your resume.
And I'm not saying that to their credit, Joe.
Yes.
To rudely interrupt you, to their credit, it's not necessarily their fault.
Right.
With Michigan, we didn't know Connor. Like, I don't want to take anything away from them. My whole thing is with them. I don't know where you're deficient. Right.
That's
like,
what
I don't know where you're going to be tested.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say here is that, like, I'm not saying Texas is overrated. That statement did not come out of my mouth at all. And the point I'm trying to make here. We're not going to find out who Texas is until they play Georgia. That goes in line with what I'm talking about here with Quinn Ewers. Is the real Quinn Ewers the one we saw against Alabama last year? Is that the real Quinn Ewers? Or is it the one that beats up on Michigan?
Well, Joe, I can make the argument that wasn't the real Bama. Like, Joe, the Bama at the end of the season beats that Texas team.
Georgia will be the hardest team that he has ever faced.
No, that Bama team that he faced 3 years ago.
We got
I mean, Joe, 9 of the 11 guys on that defense got drafted.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay. Like, I mean, Georgia's going to be a big test for him, and it's going to be at home. I get what you're trying to say. I'm not ready to go there yet, but I don't know. I think that they're going to definitely get tested. In reference to your Arch situation,
I'm mostly
Joe, I'm
mostly being obnoxious with that, but
I know you are, but you can't pull him in this one. You can't pull Quinn in this one.
No.
You got to let him roll and see where it takes you. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on here. Joe, I really want to get to Penn State versus USC before we hit these last two.
Okay.
Penn State goes into LA and pulls off a win in overtime. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, so I think where the credit is due here for Penn State, they were down in a brutal situation. They were down 20-6 at halftime. It looked like extremely bleak. And all I heard saw everybody saying on Twitter, Blake, was, oh, teams can't travel across the country. Look at this cross-country travel. We can't pick teams that have to go that far to play a football game. And Penn State rallies. Tyler Warren makes a bunch of amazing plays. He goes 17 receptions for 224 yards and just has an unreal game. Drew Allard, despite having a couple picks, makes a couple of key crucial throws to help them win the football game. And more importantly, their defense steps up to the plate to get a pick that helps them take the game to overtime. And nobody's talking about, suddenly, after Penn State wins this game, nobody's talking about the cross-country travel all of a sudden. We can't just remove that from the conversation, because I think that is really strong credit for Penn State. A lot of people after this game for Penn State were saying, well, they look kind of sloppy. Like, I don't think they're as good as Ohio State and Oregon. They battled through, which is a really hard circumstance of them to have to go the furthest distance they could. They had to get on a bus for an hour, fly over 5 hours, and go all the way to Los Angeles. And despite being down 20-6, they rallied back and they won that football game. They deserve a lot of damn credit for that.
You know, Ohio State fans are going to come in here and say, well, at least our quarterback didn't throw 3 picks. We had the same amount of travel. I'm just going to throw that out there.
No, it's not. It's less travel. Ohio to – am I crazy? Ohio to Oregon?
Pennsylvania, it's a little bit further distance, but it's not as if that it's not in the same stratosphere. To your point, okay, 2-15 are teams in the Midwest going out west. The only wins are Penn State and Indiana. Indiana beat UCLA and Penn State beat USC. Funny, both teams are in LA. Just going to throw that out there. Look, man, they made a lot of deficiencies in this game, meaning Penn State. And this game came down to USC made a lot of plays on defense. And, Joe, of the 3 interceptions they got 6 points out of it. That lost in the football game. Okay. I mean, when you get turnovers like those 3 interceptions and only get 6 points, that's going to – look, man, it ultimately beat you. If you get one touchdown and one of those turnovers, you win the football game. Right? I mean, like, massively win the football game. But you didn't. Andy Kotelnicki called a hell of a game. And I'm going to say this too. Tyler Warren better be in the Heisman Trophy conversation.
Just seriously, we want to give Travis Hunter's a great football player and he deserves to be where he is. But like, we want to talk about how versatile Travis Hunter is. My man is playing quarterback, center. He's playing running back. He's playing wildcat quarterback. They'll just use him wherever. That kid's freaking awesome to watch. He deserves more love. You're 100% spot on.
Well, here's another thing. The inability for USC to cover him in crucial situations makes D'Anton Lynn look really bad. How do you lose the only weapon that they have? Guys, Joe, the second receiver, if I'm not mistaken, in yards in this game was Julian Fleming, 2 of 33, if I'm not mistaken. Or if it's not 2, he's going to be right there around 3. He was the only weapon that he kept going to. It's the only weapon that Aller continue to throw the ball to, right? I mean,
Harrison Wallace was 3 for 53, and the Nick Singleton, who's a running back, was. But you're right that nobody had a big game outside of.
And Julian Fleming went 2 of 33, did he not?
Yeah, he was.
I mean, so regardless of who it was, I mean, your inability to stop him was unreal. Joe, I got to be real. I thought that Penn State would be able to come in this game and run the football all over the place. To be honest with you, they struggled at times to run the football in crucial situations. But Andy Kotelnicki, when everything was on the line, he pulled out every stop. Joe, the swinging ladder, tight end, snap the ball, touchdown by Tyler Warren. Oh, my God. Like that. I mean, Joe, they put for all the shit that James Franklin takes, for you to be in a crucial situation and you run a swinging ladder where a tight end snaps the football and you convert for a touchdown. Look, man, say what you want about Franklin, but for that to be allowed, like he allowed that. That takes a lot of growth. That takes a lot of trust in an OC. And I got to be real with you. I think coaching staff-wise, from both coordinators with Allen and Kotelnicki with Franklin, Joe, they're underrated. I mean, look, I thought that Lincoln called a pretty decent game. The execution wasn't there. But when I look at Penn State versus USC, and USC's 2 of 11 on third down, and they can't convert off of turnovers, that's the ball game. That's it. They had, Joe, 7 third down conversions in the second half that they just went to poo-poo. That's on Lincoln. That's on the execution. And good on Penn State for converting on those situations too.
To throw out the toxic talking point before we try to grip it to the other games. I think Lincoln Riley's
now 5-8 in the last 13 games.
Lincoln, look, we got to stop beating around this, and I think more people are starting to have this conversation, a conversation that I think we were one of the only few that were willing to have in the offseason. The dude should be on the hot seat at the end of this year. Like, he can't get the job done. It was, and I hate myself. I always do this, and I think that one of my improvements as a broadcaster is not allowing for this to happen. Allowing for the just national groupthink push me off of my beliefs and my points. I let everybody be so high after they beat LSU, talk me into thinking that USC and Lincoln Riley were legit and that they were going to bounce back this year. They can't finish, and they can't play with a physical enough of an identity, even on offense, that they can finish football games.
Joe, can I rudely interrupt that? I don't know if that's true, because again, they went out there with Woody Marks, and ran for over 100 yards rushing, though.
Yes, they did, but in the second half, they couldn't finish. They couldn't.
That's fair.
They were up 20-6, and you know what you need to do when you're up 20-6?
Run the football.
You need to put your foot on your opponent's throat. They did not effectively finish. I agree with you. I mean, like, it does look like they've had more success running the football, but it's not to the degree that you need to win games in the Big Ten. I stand by it. Lincoln Riley is the most overrated head coach in all of college football. Has he produced some fantastic quarterbacks that have gone on to play in the NFL? Absolutely. Is he a brilliant play caller? Absolutely. Is he a good head coach? No. They will never win a national championship, and I question if he even has the capability to win one in the rest of his career if it doesn't finish up at USC.
All right. So to your point, though, about Lincoln Riley being on the hot seat, I understand where you're coming from. Okay? Like, I get it. I just, Joe, I see a game like yesterday and they lose, and I'm like, okay, well, they're supposed to lose. They're supposed to lose to that team. More established program, new conference.
I so defeatist, though.
Hold on. But they lose to Minnesota and Michigan. Okay? So, Joe, if the truth would be, if they took care of business against the teams that they probably should have beaten, we're not having this conversation. It's not the primetime situations. Like, Joe, that was a great football game. They lost in overtime. Okay. They went toe-to-toe with a top 10 football team and almost won it at home. All right. But losing to Minnesota and Michigan is where he has the issues.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to give him more time. I'm going to stay with the realistic nature of this. I don't think they're going to fire him. I think they owe him too much money to fire him, and that's just USC. I think that this is what I truly believe. Their booster base thinks that it's all NIL related. It's not. Like not getting the players there, not recruiting, it's not. Other teams have and other programs have just as much success and have the same issues that you do. I wouldn't pull the plug yet, man. Not yet. I know because you're going to have to give them another year anyway. I think you're right ultimately. Then he'll probably be let go or move on or something else will happen. But I think that we're 18 months away from that, something like that happening, right? Like I think that we're a good distance away of that happening. Yeah, I don't think because Joe, I mean, you owe him $60 million. You know,
right?
Like it's just not gonna. I said that about Jimbo, but I don't know if USC will pull a Texas A&M and pay somebody $75 million to walk away.
They don't have the rich alumni base like Texas A&M does to have that kind of an action.
You got to find a reason to fire him with calls and not pay him or give him half or do something. I don't know. But, are they done with the Clay Helton buyout? I don't know any of that. So in reference to Lincoln, I see the progress that they've had made, Joe, if I'm being honest. Like, I think they're more physical on the line of scrimmage. I think that you can't deny that. Okay, the way that they're running the football, but I agree with you that there comes a point where they got to figure something out here. All right, let's get to Tennessee and Florida here. Joe, another overtime thriller. Tennessee at home. Florida almost knocks off Tennessee. How did you see this game?
I kind of laugh at the fact that you're using the word thriller because I don't think many Tennessee fans would classify this as a thriller. I think that this was a heart attack.
As a non-fan to either one of them, that was a really good football game.
Sure, but it also was a huge heart attack because what we talked about, it's supposed to be a get-right opportunity. It's supposed to be a game where you start to feel out the rhythm of your offense, work through some of the issues. And right now, Nico has no passing touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. He went from in that early stretch of non-conference games, completing 71% of his passes and 10.4 yards per attempt to 60% and 6.9 yards per attempt. He went backwards. A lot of the things I commended him for and praised him for is that he was willing to take chances. I think he's lost his confidence. Like that's my main takeaway from this. We know what Billy is and what's happening with Florida, and I almost think it's tiresome to talk about Florida more because they're a team that's also kind of a non-factor. But Nico and this Tennessee offense just feels like it does not have the confidence that it needs to have to be firing on all cylinders. They're not going to touch the level of production that Hendon Hooker and that Vols offense had 2 years ago. They have taken huge steps back. And I got to be honest with you here. We try to come up with solutions on this show. I don't know if I have one. I really don't. The game's moving too fast for Nico right now, and I don't know if this is something that gets fixed this season or if it's going to take until next year.
What conversation did you and I have about Nico Iamaleava last week? Literally last Sunday. What was the conversation you and I had? I said what?
That he was struggling.
That he was massively struggling. And Tennessee fans came into our show and tried to laugh me out of the building, saying that it was the O-line's fault, that Oklahoma has a really good defense and all these different situations. Okay. No, your really good defensive line and your really good front seven and your running game with Dylan Sampson is continuously winning you football games. Now, what you're doing is, and I've seen Tennessee fans do this, you'll clip a play of your left tackle and Lance Hurd giving up, but the O-line took over in the second half. You don't stress anybody out throwing the football. Joe, they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Until he starts running the football and starts being a dual threat of what he is, nobody is going to respect you throwing the football. He is not a true pocket guy. I have no idea why anybody remotely thought that he could sit in the pocket and throw the ball 30 times and think that he would carve you up. Joe, every Power 4 game that he's played so far, he has massively struggled. Joe, one of the worst teams in the Power 4 in NC State picked him off twice. Now, you could say, well, his arm got hit and he had a sailed ball. It was probably a good decision. It wasn't. It was a horrible decision. He threw it into triple coverage and it got picked. You go to Arkansas, okay, against a secondary that had been really beat up and got thrown all over against a kid in Marcel Reed. Joe, Arkansas the week before you played him threw the football around on that Arkansas secondary. A kid who's a true freshman, I might add. I don't know if it's the game's moving too fast for him. I think the reason that Heupel is running the football the way that he is because he ultimately does not trust Nico to make big plays. The first scripted drive, he looked good because he knew where he needed to go with the football. So outside of that, there was a stretch in the game where he went 2 of 10 passing. He was making very bad decisions. He was making very bad passes. He was late. I don't know what to make of him. And quite honestly, it's 100% what kept Florida in the football game. 100%. Now, did Billy Napier aid Tennessee in winning? Yeah. Joe, they went for it on 4th and 1. Yeah. And with DJ Lagway in the game, they ran a freaking jet sweep, and they had 3 inches to gain a first down. Billy's an idiot, okay? You got bailed out by bad decision-making on Billy's part 2. Joe, Graham Mertz, picking this secondary apart at moments. He's 11 of 15 for over 100. What was it? He was 100. It was 11 for 15 for 125 yards and a touchdown. If Mertz plays that entire football game, you're not winning that game in overtime. That's the truth. That is the 100% truth. So they get the win. It's a good win for Tennessee to continue to be on your path. Joe, offensively throwing the football, they have a massive issue. A very massive issue. And again, I got obliterated by Tennessee fans last week for bringing this up. And now it's starting to play out. And, Joe, here's the thing I would tell you the most. Against secondaries that aren't that great.
Look, I'm not ready to give up on him.
Don't give up on him.
I know you're not. I think that some people might be trying to give up on him. I'm not ready to. I think that all the tools are there. I still stand by. It looks like a kid where things are just moving too quickly for him. When, especially quarterbacks, when guys start to lose confidence, when it shows up on film. It shows up in their decisions. They're not as willing to take chances. I think of 2 very specific examples of guys who had really hot starts to their careers when they were freshmen or redshirt freshmen, and then started to fizzle out. That had a very similar situation. And I'm not saying that I think that this is what Nico becomes, but I think that there needs to be carefulness in preparing him in order for him to be successful, in order to bounce back from this. The 2 guys to think of, Tyler Van Dyke when he was at Miami and DJ Uiagalelei when he was at Clemson. Both started off where they were being commended as bright prospects that would be huge for the future of their programs. And we see how far they've fallen. And the reason that they've fallen is because of just their confidence falling apart, just completely deteriorating over a game-to-game basis. I'm not saying that Nico is on that path, but if they're not careful and they don't do a better job of setting him up, and I don't know exactly what that means. Like, I don't know what they need to do because I don't sit in those meeting rooms. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not going to pretend like I know what it looks like.
I know. Can I tell you?
Let me finish what I was just saying, though, is that Heupel, coaching staff, all of those guys in that building need to be very careful because things like this, young quarterbacks, things can get really slippery. Like Bryce Young's another good example in the NFL. Things can get slippery so quickly if you don't set these guys up to succeed when things start to go poorly.
2 reads, if they're there, throw them. If they're not, run it.
Yeah.
Get down, don't get hurt. You want them to have success? 2 reads, run, get out of there.
And that's what Jalen Milroe did last year. Halfway through the season.
Jalen Milroe did.
Halfway through the season, they just told him run.
Well, I mean, Joe, you literally have Nick Saban out there saying the reason we started winning football games is we told Milroe 2 reads and then you're out.
And look, you put that on his shoulders, and then you gave him the off season to improve under obviously different coaching staff, but you gave him the offseason to improve. And while yesterday's game wasn't great by him, he still looks twice as good as he did last year.
I agree. So but the problem is either they're really worried about him getting hurt, which I can understand. Okay. I don't know if they're calling plays that best benefits his style of play. Now, Joe, is he too scared to run? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, that's a whole different topic. In reference to the game, look, there's another quarterback on the other side that's a true freshman that made some better plays than what Nico did. DJ Lagway, I mean, Joe, he throws a touchdown pass that sends it into overtime, right? Like you have a critical situation where a kid who's highly talented makes the play that Nico could wind up not making. And to be honest, and again, if we're looking at this game, I think Tennessee's run game is really good. I think their front seven is really freaking good. They have championship pieces on their team.
Yeah.
Okay. But they have an offensive situation where if they don't get it corrected, they're going to be on the outside looking in. Joe, I'm going to say this too because Florida's attached to this game. I know it's a byproduct. We keep saying this. Billy lost them the football game. Billy Napier lost Florida the football game. And
it is insane, by the way, that like we live in this world where he should be fired, but we have no idea when it's going to happen because it's their administrative mess.
Joe,
it's just so stupid.
I don't. You're going for it on fourth down, and you have one of the best running quarterbacks as a young freshman. I get it. And you're running a jet sweep on 4th and 3 inches.
Again, it's inexcusable. It's well, and there was a missed field goal too, where they had 12 guys on the field, or not a missed field goal, but a field goal that got called back because they had 12 men on the field, like stupid shit like that.
Well, I'm just going to tell every Tennessee fan this: rivalry or not, if Graham Mertz finishes that football game, you're losing. Joe, here's another thing about this Tennessee team. Joe, if Graham Mertz can pick the secondary apart, what do other teams that have a pulse, what can they do? Because here's the truth. Taylon Green did it. Graham Mertz did it. I mean, you got better opponents that you're going to face that are better than them. So, again, man, Joe, when does Tennessee play Alabama? Is it this week or next week?
Next week. Let me double check. I think it's
third week in October is the rivalry. So I don't know. This is going to be the
that's this weekend.
So Tennessee versus Bama is this weekend.
That's the 19th. Yeah. I need to change the list of games I texted you for tomorrow.
I'll put it in there. I'll know. All right. Let's wrap it up with this. Joe, Alabama, coming off a loss to Vanderbilt, has a scare against South Carolina. Your thoughts on the game?
This Alabama team, and it's crazy that we're able to kind of sit here and juxtapose these two conversations next to one another because they both, in both the previews we did, they both were set up to bounce back, to work on the things against weak teams and figure out what went wrong and improve upon it. And it looked like Alabama was doing that. First quarter, they were kicking their ass. Their defensive line. I tweeted this. They looked pissed off. They were getting after that rushing attack. The Jalen Milroe passing attack, run game. It was all flowing. And they got too high on themselves. It's back-to-back weeks where this has happened, where it feels like they mailed it in. They mailed it in after a quarter. Alabama can't win football games by doing crap like that. Right now, to paint the picture, I think what Alabama's biggest problem is right now, it's more diagnosable than it is Tennessee's. They're undisciplined. And it's the case of having a new head coach who's taking over, who's a brilliant coach, but doesn't have the buy-in fully from his roster. 94th in total penalties. They had 7 against South Carolina, 3 personal fouls, 65th in total turnovers lost. They had 2 against South Carolina. They're making stupid, silly mistakes. If you can correct that to some degree, this Alabama team is still a great team, but they're shooting themselves in the foot and they're playing
I don't think they're a great team.
They're playing sloppy, undisciplined football. Let me rephrase. They have talent at important positions that would constitute them being competitive enough to be in the SEC championship conversation. But because they're playing so sloppy, they're dragging themselves down a ton.
Joe, their O-line got absolutely abused. Now,
Yes.
I get that South Carolina's D-line, I would put them as one of the best, if not the best. I think you can make the argument they're one of the best defensive lines in the country. But, man, you talk about the undisciplined stuff. Think about the end of the game, Joe, the onside kick. South Carolina got an onside kick, and if that situation is managed better, you're going to lose another football game. Okay? I think you're getting out here. I think it's too easy to say that it's on, and I know you're not saying this. I don't think they're only getting out disciplined. Joe, I think they're getting out coached. I think the defensive wise, they're getting out coached. Think about this. If I would have told you this last week, that South Carolina would have more passing yards, more rushing yards, would get an onside kick in a critical situation, and that Lenore Sellers would have more passing or the same amount of passing touchdowns as Jalen Milroe, you would have said, down goes Bama. But because Shane Beamer mismanaged a situation at the end of the game, they wind up holding on and winning. And sometimes, Joe, you got to just find ways to hold on and win football games, right? Like, you just got to find ways to hold on. But the bottom line is Jalen Milroe got outperformed. Everybody got outperformed in that second half. South Carolina comes into the second half with an 8-minute drive to start it off and gets a touchdown. They're right back in the football game. They can't get off the field. They're too, I bring up the Brooks Austin thing. I know that went viral. Joe, they're still in man-to-man coverage. They start off the game in zone. It starts working for him. Sellers has no idea what he's doing. Then they go to man-to-man. Sellers, on 3 crucial third downs, picks up first downs with his legs. Nobody's spying him. That's a schematical issue. Like, at this moment, I get what you're saying about them being undisciplined, but you're running too high in man-to-man coverage with a quarterback that can run. It's the last thing that you do in situations like this. And then secondly, Joe, they did nothing to stop that pass rush. Nothing. Okay, they did some better things in the second half with getting the ball out quickly for Jalen Milroe. Bro, Jalen was getting his ass killed in the first half. Killed. Those 2 interceptions he had was awful. I tweeted this to you during the game. The kid Kilgore that I brought up in the preview of this game, what did I say? Put him on your freaking draft board. This kid can play. Out.
I haven't watched this tape, so I'm not going to speak.
Joe, everything that listen, I'm not joking around. That defense is actually really good. I don't give 2 shits what anybody tells me. You played a really good defense. They're top 20 in the country in passing yards allowed. They're top 20 in the country in run defense. They're up there in turnovers that they get defensively. They're number 3 in sacks. That defense is really stinking good. However, you made no adjustments. I've seen now 8 straight quarters of the lack of adjustments defensively that you're having for Alabama not be there. And that is going to cost you down the road. I don't know against who. You know what? I'll tell you against who. You ready? You can't go up against coaches again or for the first time. Joe, Brian Kelly will make halftime adjustments. We saw that Kirby Smart did it, and it almost won them the football game. These premier coaching staffs that you have that that can really take it to somebody and adjust at halftime or on the sidelines, you're going to lose another football game if you keep being vanilla the way that you are. That's the only way that I see it, because they're doing what you're asking them to do. They're running the man-to-man coverage, but Lenore Sellers is out scheming you. Joe, by the way, they went man-to-man coverage against a guy that's 6'6" and is a track star in Harbor. He has no help. Lenore Sellers only has one hope. He's got to throw the ball into the end zone. And you still call a defense where you're in man-to-man coverage, bro.
Look, I don't disagree that I have said this, and I said this last week when they lost to Vanderbilt, that Womack has not been coaching to the level that he needs to. Like, they're not playing good defense, and they're not scheming good defense. There's been a lot written about how they're not appearing to be prepared at all. I still think, though, the way that they put against Georgia shows me that there's still the ghost of a good football team, one that can be an SEC champion if they figure out how to get their shit together. That might be too far gone at this point, but if they're able to recover and play better defense and make better decisions, they have the athletes. Again, I don't think it's going to happen, but the way that they played in the first half against Georgia still exists. I will bring this up.
Well, hold on. Let me ask you this, because I want your answer to this. Does it in this sense? Ever since the second half, when Kirby made a halftime adjustment, it has not existed.
Okay.
So my point to this would be, I think that there's a lot to be said that Kirby figured something out against you and other teams are replicating it. You know how I know that that's the case? Because Clark Lee said it's exactly what he did.
Well, but that's not what I was talking about. All I'm trying to say here is that half, if they can get back to playing football that way, that is a team that
they can.
I don't know if it's that simple. I mean, it's not like we're banking off of a projection from the preseason here. Like, they played one of the best halves of football that we've seen, and I know that I'm kind of giving them a lot of grace there.
A lot.
If there's some way to recover and get back to that and get back focused, they just feel unfocused, undisciplined. And again, Womack has also been doing a really shit job. I have to bring this up though, and I'm not saying that this correlation means that they're going to get everything fixed. But last year, they looked like shit in the first half of the season up until October 7th. You
can't do that.
No. I'm not bringing this up to say that like this automatically means they're going to be successful. I'm just pointing out that there are two halves to a season. They barely beat Texas A&M 26-21. They barely beat Arkansas 24-21. And then they went on to dominate Tennessee 34-20. And then they beat LSU at home 42-28. I'm just bringing this up to remind everyone, there is recoverability with teams that start the season slow. There always is. And especially now more than ever with the expanded playoff. I'm
going to throw this out there. Okay. There's one massive issue with what you just said. You ready?
They don't have Nick Saban. I mean, I get that. And I wasn't trying to make that point to say that, they're going to go on to go to the playoff and win the SEC. I'm just merely trying to point out here that they were going through similar issues last year. And this applies to every team that we talk about. Tennessee, same shit. Tennessee could have some sort of ascension. If they could beat Bama this weekend, they could go on some crazy run. Maybe I should have brought that up last segment.
I don't know, man. We'll see. We'll see. By the way, it's not missed on me that we have some teams in here that are on playoff contention watch, by the way. What about Arizona State beating Utah? See, we forget about that game because it was on a Friday night.
Well, I don't know who did Arizona State? Arizona State lost to Texas Tech, I want to say.
I don't know. I have no idea. They're 5-1.
The Big 12, you can honestly just pick any team. It sucks for Utah. Cam Rising.
I'm gonna collect on my Cam Rising take. You ready? Told you.
He's injury prone.
I mean, no, it's more than that. He's lost his fastball.
Well, he had a messed up hand coming into the game, and they brushed him back too soon.
Joe, I don't care if he had a broken back. I'm not giving it. It doesn't change the fact that dude's so bad right now, man. He's so bad. He was bad against Baylor. He was bad against Arizona State. He's been bad.
He wasn't bad in the beginning of the season. When he got hurt was when he started playing bad.
Yeah, when he played Northern Dookie State, okay, he wasn't bad. You're right.
We have a couple super chats, by the way, before we get out of here.
Before we get out of here. I don't know where we left off. Elks with a $5 super chat says, super wacky, funky, awesome game, but lose by 1 on the road with a drive to win it. Bad OPI call. Can't wait for the rematch in Indy. Good game, Ducks. Beat UM.
It was not a bad OPI call.
I don't think it was a bad OPI call either.
Not to be a dick, but I find it a little funny that some of the Ohio State fans are just like, they were so disenfranchised by us not giving them like love that they deserved, and we were being just being negative on them apparently, even though we weren't. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, good game, Oregon. It's like, what? Where did that energy go from earlier in the week? Whatever.
I mean, I'm with you. I just think that they weren't tested and they got overconfident on who they really were.
He's talking about Denzel. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Also, he says all 8 were off coverage. That's why I was screaming. to his
He's
earlier.
talking about Burke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is crazy.
I mean, look here, man. Here's the truth. Off coverage, bump and run, man to man wouldn't have mattered because Evan Stewart made the play in the end zone when he was right on him. So sorry. You all right over there? Are you dying?
No, I just drank water and it went down the wrong way.
All right, that's what she said.
I knew you were going to say that.
Linda Young with a $10 super chat says, any team that comes into Death Valley and plays LSU on Saturday night, there's a good chance they will lose. Stop the hate on LSU, Joe.
Why does Linda think I hate LSU so much? It's every show. What Joe hates LSU. Look, I'm not hate. Whatever. I shouldn't have picked Ole Miss.
I tried.
I'm still going to pick Bama though. Still going to pick Bama though. Is Arkansas at Arkansas?
Yeah, it's at Arkansas. Okay. And then at Kyle Field. I'm just going to tell you this. Joe, there's some things that don't change. Death, taxes, and LSU playing on Saturday night. By the way, they're 110-15 in night games since 2000.
All right. Well, I'll take that into account when I pick
Alabama.
Yeah, when I pick Alabama.
See y'all tomorrow, man. Peace.